Hello everyone, welcome to the CPC Miners Week 0 Power Rankings. My name is Jason, aka BaconChest, and I'm here with a co-host.
Hi, I'm Jmac. You can call me Jake if you'd like. I am the coach of the Waterloo Weaviles here in the D-League.
Yeah, awesome, and I am coaching the St Kilda Superiors in the Majors. So, we're going to go through Week 0 Power Rankings. We're going to go through team by team. You'll be able to see my rank and Jmac's rank on the screen, and basically the order of this is I averaged out our two rankings where there was a tie. The team that got the higher ranking from one of us got ahead. So I think that should work out. If there's any questions, let me know, but you'll be able to see what our rankings are as we go through. So let's start with number 16. So this was my number 16 and your number 15, which is the OKC Thunderclaps, coached by Rinnigan. So what were your thoughts on this team?
I think he started out the draft really, really solid. His first 5 picks were Lop, Bulu, Jirachi, Nidoqueen, and Arcanine. And then for the latter half of the draft, I believe his picks just fell off the board, other than Xurkitree in the last round. I feel like Jirachi is kind of forced into a support role most weeks. He doesn't really have the rockers on the team to support it other than Nidoqueen, and I believe he lacks the ability to remove hazards, as Swellow and Cryogonal are his only 2 forms to remove hazards. So I feel like he might struggle a bit with hazards throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, definitely. Especially the fact that Arcanine is there, which, you really want to be a defensive fire type, but if you can't remove hazards, then it really struggles in that role. It's one of those mons that I think really needs good team support to shine. So, yeah, I think that's a big problem. The other thing I felt about this team, whilst Lop can be a pretty decent breaker, there's not that much to actually really sweep. I guess you've got the 3 normal types, but that's obviously a big problem when 3 of your kind of late game sweepers that are fast and can outspeed things are all the same, pretty much the same typing. Like obviously fighting, flying as secondaries, but all spamming normal type moves.
Yeah, and the coverage options aren't really all that great. I mean, Lop gets the punches, but Swellow, I think, doesn't get much. I guess it can run both physical and special sets with Specs or Flame Orb Facade.
Yeah, that's not too bad, I guess. Like with both Swellow, Jirachi can also run physical and special, so that's not too bad. Yeah, overall, probably a little bit limited in terms of the offense. And then the bulk, yeah, as you said, Jirachi, I feel, is going to be forced into that support role, being like... It won't have to run rocks that often, at least, because Nidoqueen is there, which is a very reliable stealth rocker, but I think it will have to run something like a Wish support set much more often than you would normally expect from a Jirachi, which is a bit of a problem. And then something like Tapu Bulu, where you might run Choice Band or Choice Scarf sometimes, is probably going to have to be a bit more defensive in a lot of games. Although at least there is another good ground resist in the form of Araquanid, so that's always nice to see.
Even still, yeah, like Araquanid's not super bulky, so it won't take a lot of ground hits. It's always nice to have that option, just in case.
Yeah, and the hazards here are okay. Araquanid, Nidoqueen, Jirachi, only 3 of them, which is not great, but all 3 are pretty good at their jobs. Overall, it's not actually as terrible a team as I think I initially thought looking at it, but I do think the offense is really where it kind of lacks. It's just very one-dimensional at the top with the fast normal types, and then I guess Xurkitree, you kind of know what it's going to do. At least he does have Z on the Xurkitree, which is something I couldn't manage on my team. Even then, you kind of know what that's doing, and then Nidoqueen and Tapu Bulu can both dish out big hits, but they're not quite as fast. So yeah, I think this team may struggle a bit, but if you can use Mega Lop well, then it's such a good mon in the format. So may still pick up some wins.
Right, and even looking at his draft, there's not many special threats. He has Xurkitree and Swellow. Nidoqueen can run that Life Orb, but there's nothing that can break on the special side.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's about all we have to say about this team. So let's move on to the next one. So we have the Monterey Suicunes. This was my number 16 and your number 14. And they're coached by Jed Swally. So I want to start talking about this team just because, yeah, this was the team I ranked 16th. I when I sorted the team by speed tiers, I looked at those top four mons and I thought, wow, everything you have that's over 100 base speed are mons that I don't think you necessarily want to bring every week. So that was like the first big problem. And then also the fact that there's like double electrics, double waters, which are not the like electric. I feel is a bad type to double up on. Water's not as bad, but I don't necessarily see what the function of that was. Where like Rotom Wash and Empoleon, both defensive defog water types. I don't get this team in a lot of ways, which were kind of my initial thoughts. What were your initial thoughts on seeing this team?
So he did end up grabbing Rotom Wash round 2 and then Empoleon round 3. I can see the Empoleon pick being actually decent because it opens up Rotom Wash to run offensive sets if it needs to. Scarf is a thing that is run in OU sometimes. So like having that option for a fast Volt switch without being locked into a defensive role might actually benefit some weeks. Yeah, no, the double electrics was definitely interesting. One is not weak to ground, which is excellent, but having just the double up typing is not the best.
That said, the rest of the team, I do like Mega Gardevoir Victini, I don't mind. Again, it's another double up with typing, but I mean, I guess like Gardevoir is neutral to Dark, so that's okay. Yeah, I don't know. I think those two can maybe break some teams, because they are both obviously very, very strong. But aside from that, I'm not really seeing offensive mons that you want to bring every week. Probably Buzzwole is the third one. So like Mega Gardevoir, Victini, Buzzwole, and then, you're bringing
maybe
some of...
Sneasel for priority.
Yeah, but there are going to be some matchups where Sneasel is completely useless. Like if you're up against a Celesteela, like you're probably not bringing Sneasel because it's just free Celis every time. And like Tauros and Noivern, and even to some extent Heliolisk are similar in the sense of they're not mons that you want to bring every single week, or even like probably you might want to bring them for like a third of games each. So it's really going to be like he's really going to have to get a lot out of those kind of niche offensive threats, and he's going to have to bring one or two of them every week just for speed tiers, because otherwise, like especially given this team doesn't really have a good Trick Room option. Like Mega Gardevoir can run Trick Room, but obviously it's like base 100 speed, so it's going to get outslowed by a lot of things. And then outside of that, yeah, it kind of feels like it almost should be a Trick Room team with Mega Gardevoir and Victini, but it needs a slower mon there to actually take advantage of that. And like, obviously Amoonguss is amazing and I love Amoonguss, but it's not gonna like sweep through a team.
Neither will Dustmore.
No, definitely not. And yeah, aside from that, like the defog support is very strong. Like Rotom, Gligar, and Empoleon. I don't like that they're all kind of in the same speed tier. Like you basically just need to have a mon that's like base 90 or above and have it run Taunt, and you've stopped this team from clicking defog ever, which is a bit of a like pet peeve of mine on teams where you just have a bunch of mons that do the same thing in the same speed tier. I'm like, no, you need to split those up a bit more. And that's the same with rockers. Like Gligar and Empoleon are both rockers, so the fact that they're both also pressured to be rockers and defoggers is not something I'm a huge fan of. And then there's no spikes, no T-spikes, no webs. I feel like this team may be a bit linear in a lot of ways.
Yeah, even so, this is my week 1 matchup, and I'm having trouble preparing for it. In all honesty.
Okay, interesting.
He can bring 7 different mons, 8 different mons that can all do the same thing. So like just having every mon do the same thing is kind of interesting for matchups because you don't know what's going to come, what's going to be in that role.
Yeah. Okay.
So it could maybe play some mind games.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I feel like, sometimes that'll be helpful, and sometimes it'll be like, well, I've got, 5 jack of all trades. I've got 5 mons that can do this role okay, and none of them can do it amazingly well. But yeah, he did, like, fill out his roster with a lot of, like, lower tier threats. I think maybe probably combining those, like, combining a couple of those into a higher tier mon might have been a better option, in terms of drafting. Like, things like Noivern plus Sneasel, like you probably, I don't know how the points work out there, but you might be able to get like a Weavile instead, and that might have been like a little bit more powerful as an option for this team. But, like we'll see how it goes, and yeah, as you say, having some trouble prepping with it, so prepping for it, I should say. So that's about it for the Monterey Suicunes. Let's move on to the next team. So this is the Texas Swallowtails, who I had at number 13, and you had at number 16. So why don't you take us away on this team?
So I hate this draft. There's not really a lot of decent defog on the team. Like you have Comfey and Skuntank and Mega B, which doesn't want to switch into rocks at all. He does have a good, decent Weber in Galvantula. It's not the best Weber in the game, but I guess it will serve the purpose of slowing down big threats. I think Kyurem Black as a Z user is amazing. I think he's very slanted towards the physical side, so it doesn't really offer many threats on the special side. He's very hazard weak. Like your top threats, your Galvantula, your B, your Ninetales, your Kyurem, those all take 25% from rocks, which could be game breaking for him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Ferrothorn serves the purpose of being bulky. I don't really think it synergizes well. You have Fire Weakness in B and Ferrothorn. Amora's there to do nothing. I believe the team wants to be hyper offense, but it kind of fails to support that overall.
Yeah, okay. That's pretty reasonable. I think the thing I don't mind about this team, I do agree that it needs a better defogger, and like it's probably just going to be Comfey every week. It's like it looks like this team's going to be Comfey and then 5 offensive Comfey, then 1 of Seismitoad and Ferrothorn, and then 4 offensive Mons every week, which does make it very predictable, I think. But on the other hand, you know, like, you can predict Kyurem Black coming as much as you want. That doesn't make it any easier to deal with. And similar for things like Terrakion, like, you know, some teams just don't have good options for dealing with those things defensively. So I do think, yeah, whilst I agree with you that it's limited in terms of the utility options, and there's a little bit of, there is a bit of a problem with a lot of the offensive threats being weak to rocks, I still think it's probably going to pick up some wins just on the basis of, like, Hooper, Kyurem, Terrakion just punching through teams, particularly with the like Mega B and the Comfey to sort of U-turn and bring them in. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know why Ninetales is here, and he picked it up like reasonably early. Yeah, like it was in the first like 6 rounds or something.
I think it's one of his favorite Pokemon. I think that's the reason.
Yeah. Oh, so this team is coached by Draconubus Gaming. I'm just gonna call him Dre if I refer to him again from now on, but just since I didn't mention that earlier. But yeah, I do think, like, I mean, I guess the Claydol is here, and that gives it a spinner, which is nice. I always like to see a spinner when you've got webs, because obviously you don't want to be getting rid of both sides' hazards. Sometimes you do have to get rid of the hazards on your side. But obviously Claydol's a bit underwhelming as a spinner, shall we say.
It's not great.
It's not great. I mean, I guess, I'm trying to think. I guess its weaknesses synergize okay with things like the Kyurem, so that's not too bad. Yeah, like overall, I don't know about this team. I think it's definitely got a lot of offensive threats that you have to prep for. Like, depending on your team, Mega B can be hard to prep for, Tarak, Kyurem, Hooper, especially with webs. But yeah, I think I agree that overall the hazard removers really let it down, and the stacking rocks weaknesses also lets it down a bit. So I think that's probably why I've got it down at 13. I think you're probably a little bit more down on it than I am, but we'll see how it goes.
Up next, we have the Red Spark Thicavolts, coached by Dolphin Squared. I had him 11th, and Bacon had him 12th. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I don't mind this team. Like, it's got a lot of mons that I quite like having, like sort of lower tier stuff that I think is pretty good value, like stuff like Virizion, Miltank, Rotom, like the sort of middle of the draft in terms of the speed tiers. But yeah, I think the offensive breaking power, you've got like Weavile, Diggersby, I guess Sylveon as well, so that's not too bad. But then, like, how are you sweeping through an opponent's team? Like, I guess Megalati can run the Dragonant set, but you don't really want to limit Megalati to a Dragonant set every week. And then aside from that, you know, I guess you can like nasty plot up with Salazzle or Rock Polish Z-move with Virizion. He does have the Z-move on Virizion, which I rate. I think the way that he's drafted it was either Virizion or Aero, and Aero might have actually been too expensive.
Aerodactyl's 8 points, so it could have been a Z user.
Yeah, and I really like Z Aero. I think it's like quite strong just because you get the access to Z Fly, which for mons that don't have Brave Bird can be really, really game breaking.
Especially when Aerodactyl has that utility, like it can taunt, it has rocks, it has defog, it's fast, it has access to attack boosting moves, like Hone Claws, like that. It's just an overall good utility Pokemon. Yeah. And to have it at that speed tier is just crazy awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, in terms of this team overall, I think probably the bulk is a little weird. It's a bit weirdly distributed. Like you've kind of got like Miltank, Milotic, Mudsdale, a Triple M core, um, but I don't know if you necessarily like Miltank and Mudsdale, both kind of bulky rockers. You're not necessarily going to want to bring both every week. And then, if you bring Miltank, Milotic, and Mudsdale, your team's going to end up reasonably passive. Like, obviously, Mudsdale has decent attack, but Milotic and Miltank tend not to put on a lot of offensive pressure. And I think that might hurt the team a little bit. But, I mean, Mega Latios, very, very good Mon. And then it's got Weavile there to pursue trap bulky psychics, so that's really nice. And you've got really good priority between Weavile, Diggersby, and Scizor, so there's a lot of get out of jail free cards on the team. So that does help a lot.
It also helps to to have even like mons that can set up spikes or rocks, like just to have that extra chip damage for Pokemon like Latios or Weavile to come through and just sweep the rest of the team.
Yeah, definitely.
It definitely has the options to be strong. Yeah, it will force prep a lot of weeks from opponents.
Yeah, definitely. I think my main issue with the utility options on this team is that they're there, but they're not the best sort of options. So I think we'll see some teams later where they've got T-Spikes and Spikes on Mons that really want to bring in them every week, whereas here you've got Salazzle and Diggersby, where Salazzle, yeah, it's fast, but it's so frail, and Diggersby is not that fast and also reasonably frail. Neither of those Mons are particularly good at setting those hazards in comparison to, things like the Niddos that can set them really well, things like Ferrothorn that's like bulky enough to just be able to set spikes and tank a hit. So I think, yeah, like theoretically, if you can really play aggressive with those Mons and set those hazards on predicted doubles, then this team will go really well. But it is going to require quite aggressive play. So we'll see how Dolphin does with that team moving forward. So let's move on to the next one. So this is the Houston Absol, coached by Sacred Wings. And I had this team at number 10, you had it at number 13. So do you want to go first and tell us what your thoughts were?
I think where the team lacks is definitely in the higher speed tier, kind of 120 plus area. I don't believe Starmie's that great of a Scarfer if he wants to bring it. Thunderous T is a good option to be a Scarfer, same with Crocodile. Mm-hmm. So he does have that option to outspeed faster threats, but at the same time, I think you'd rather have the ability to run like Life Orb or Band or Specs in certain matchups, and if you don't have that speed tier, it could be unfortunate for prep. So I think it kind of forces it a little bit.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
I think the low tier stuff like Wigglytuff is kind of cool. It's competitive is a great ability. So just to bring that on a Z user, you can abuse Defog or something because he does have options for rocks and spikes and T-spikes to force that prep from opponents. So it could be a niche kind of set that he could bring maybe every 3 games that could maybe pick up a couple of kills and turn the tide in his favor. Klefki seems to be his best defogger. Rotom Heat, I believe, wants to be kind of a spec set every week. Maybe Life Orb to get off those strong overheats or Thunderbolts, as it does take 25% from the rocks. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my thoughts on this team, this was such a weird draft because I was following the drafts as they came through, and I saw like Mega Venusaur and Celesteela, and I was like, oh yeah, those are some really good picks. And then he just kind of didn't pick up like rocks or like he didn't pick up hazards, he didn't pick up removers for like such a long time, and I was kind of like, oh no, friend, what are you doing? But on the other hand, Mega Venusaur, Celesteela plus Suicune, those 3 combined are going to stall out some teams just by themselves. Like, those 3 are so hard to break. And there are some decent, if slightly, like, niche offensive threats here. Like, obviously, like, stuff like Komodo and Thundity, it's not like radically niche, but they're not, like, your mainstay offensive threats in the draft format. I think they should go quite well, and Yeah, I guess I sort of looked at those big three bulky mons, Suicune, Megavino, and Celesteela, and I was like, oh yes, but then I'm not sure if the team supports those mons as well as it could. Um, I think I agree with you. I'm not a huge fan of Starmie as a fast mon or as a spinner. I think it's kind of going to be pressured to be like kind of a fast offensive breaker, but it's not quite powerful enough for it. It's going to be pressured to be defensive spinner, but it's not quite bulky enough for it. It's just an awkward mon I found whenever I tried to use it. But I like the bulk here. I think it maybe needs a bit more support. I think it could really use something like Licky Licky to just like wish pass into those mons, because obviously like Suicune can rest, and I mean, but obviously like every mon can rest, but they're not necessarily going to be able to bring themselves back, aside from with Leech Seed from Megavino and Celis, as much. And particularly when, yeah, as you said, Klefki's kind of pressured to be the defogger. I think that does limit the team a little bit going forward, particularly when Crocodile and Como. Crocodile and Como is actually pretty good as a rocks pair. Like one of them can be rocks, one of them can be offensive each week, which does play a bit of mind games. So I like that. Yeah, like overall, I don't mind this team. I think it's missing a couple of elements that would make it a lot stronger, because it does have some very, very strong mons on it. It just needs maybe one mon in that 125 to 130 speed tier, and a wish passer to like help out. I guess Wigglytuff probably gets wish as well. I didn't actually write that down. It probably does get wish, but you're not going to bring you're not going to bring Wigglytuff more than, as you said, one in every 3, maybe every 4 games. So a reliable wish passer and something a bit faster, I think, would make this team really strong. As it stands, it's in the middle of the pack to me.
Yeah, it definitely has its niche. It can be bulky enough to wear out teams. Suicune has that ability just to stall endlessly if teams don't prep for it properly. So I feel like the games that Sacred's going to play are going to be long games, and he might only come out with 1 to 2 differential from each game.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't really see this team picking up big sweeps. I mean, I guess if you are able to wall an entire team with Celesteela plus Suicune, then you might be able to pick up those 6-0s. But unlike on the ladder, people aren't going to rage quit when it's 6-5. So yeah, you will have to like play out those games and try and conserve as much as possible. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's a very, very fat team in a lot of ways, but I think with hazards and status, things like Suicune, things like Mega Venusaur, even if you can burn Mega Venusaur, that really limits its longevity. Particularly if you've got something like, if you've got a Sand Setter on your team, you can wear this team down a lot more effectively.
Do you want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's do it. So next up is the Liverpool Littons, coached by Granted Boy. This is one of the big gaps in our rankings. So I had this team at number 14, and you had it at number 8. So I might explain my ranking first, I guess, since I decided to rate this team quite lowly. I really like the Mega Gallade Keldeo Garchomp. I think that's quite cool. That's a really strong group of offensive mons. My problem with those 3 is that they're all kind of like, they're all in a very similar speed tier. They're all like, you've got the double up of fighting types, and I just think that none of them have any way to like boost their speed. For example, Mega Gallade gets fairly weak priority with Shadow Sneak. Keldeo, I guess, can run Aqua Jet if you're running a physical set, but like, only Envy does that. Like, no one actually does that in Draft League for the most part. But yeah, I do think they're gonna struggle a little bit to kind of, they'll break teams, but they won't be able to finish off the game. And I think that leaves it open to being like reverse swept by something that's just like ever so slightly faster, or something with like powerful priority plus Swords Dance. So, and then I think the support mons are just a bit weird and not like, they don't like mesh together all that well as something that I would be like comfortable bringing every week. So like a Alolan Muck, that's something you're going to bring most weeks, but then like a Alolan Marowak, pretty niche. Quagsire, pretty niche. Bronzong, okay, you can bring that every week, but it's going to be a bit passive, and that might allow the setup that'll let people break past those big offensive threats that you do have. And then Aromatisse, good cleric, but not something you're going to want to bring every week. So not a bad pickup. I think that's a pretty good low tier fairy, as far as those are available. And yeah, I think it's okay. I think there's a lot of support, but I think it's going to struggle to like sweep through teams. It's going to struggle to like pick up those big wins, and be able to turn games around if something starts going against this team. So yeah, those were my sort of thoughts. What about you?
Looking at the lower tier Pokemon, that Marowak, that Aromatisse, like those two Pokemon together, the Trick Room ability is there, and Marowak can definitely turn the tide with Thick Club. It boosts its attack just to silly levels. And I believe just having that Trick Room ability on the team that is fast, that can break with Garchomp, Keldeo, and Gallade, just to have the ability to sweep late game with something slower in a Trick Room, I believe is just excellent because being able to break the slower, fatter Pokemon using your higher tier picks allows your lower tier Pokemon to clean through the faster Pokemon under Trick Room.
Yeah, okay, that's actually pretty good. I didn't think about the Trick Room option from Aromatisse, but that's a really good point. And that does give the team a bit more utility, to sweep through. So yeah, good point.
And like Z Garchomp is definitely something that's really hard to prep for. Having that Z Outrage or the Z Tectonic Rage is really difficult. He does have the faster mons in Crobat and Aselgor, which definitely helps Garchomp not have to run Scarf every week.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I wouldn't sleep on Porygon Z. That agility nasty plot set is something else.
Yeah, true. And I mean,
So I
Porygon
wouldn't sleep on.
Z is also a really good Scarf set, as well. So that does take pressure off Garchomp. And I mean, Keldeo also a very good Scarfer. So there are some good Scarf options to support the Garchomp. So that is good. I do think maybe, yeah, I guess Bronzong is probably forced to be in the team most weeks. Obviously, it's forced into being a rocker, like because Bronzong doesn't really do that much else. Um, but I think you're gonna have to bring Bronzong most weeks because you do want Garchomp to be offensive pretty much all the time. Good thing about Garchomp is sometimes you can afford to run rocks and then 3 offensive moves, and it's still an offensive mon, which is nice. But yeah, I do think it's a little bit limited in that regard. In terms of like you just know Bronzong is going to be there. You know that you're going to have to deal with that. Because realistically, you're probably not going to run Rocks Marowak, I think, all that often. It probably is going to be more often. If it comes, it's going to be that Trick Room Sweeper. Oh, and the other thing I didn't like about this team was the defog. Like, obviously, the team's not true Rocks weak in that you've got like 3 of your big offensive threats are fighting types or ground types, which does help. But I mean, if you are going to try that Trick Room option, then you don't really want Marowak taking 25% every time it comes in, and then like stuff like the support mon, so Excelgor and Crobat don't really like taking it, and having Rotom-Mow and Crobat as your defoggers. Crobat obviously quite fast, which makes it a good defogger, but the fact that it's weak to rocks does limit it a little bit. Yeah, I think it's okay, but it's not. It's certainly not like above average when it comes to the removal options on this team.
Yeah, I believe that's where I kind of fell flat in the ranking, is definitely the ability to remove hazards. If he did have something more to remove hazards, I think Grant would definitely have a stronger draft overall.
All right. So let's move on to the next team. This is the Carolina S Cavaliers, coached by Slick Panther. And this was one where we actually agreed. We both had this team at number 9. So why don't you start us off on this one?
Looking at the team, I think Mew and Togekiss might be forced in support a lot. They both have defog. I don't really think he wants to run defog on Thundy Eye, as that can set up nasty plot and just sweep through teams using the just general speed. I think Perugly wasn't a great low tier pickup with 3 points. I don't believe it's strong enough to warrant coming any week during the season. Having the ability to have Dugtrio to trap things is great. It can get rid of some of the threats that maybe Kyurem doesn't like to deal with, or Heatran, or Mega Gyarados. Munium Z is definitely something to prep for every week, because Mew can definitely just, even if it's defensive, just unleash a bomb on the opponent. I do like the ability to abuse Defog from Thundurus running Defiant. I do like that quite a bit. And definitely having Slurpuff as a webs user can definitely help out some of the higher tier Pokemon sweep in the late game.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think at first glance, this team doesn't look that strong, but when you actually look at that synergy with the fact that you've got Slurpuff to set webs, and then a lot of things that really appreciate webs, so things like Kyurem, Megagara, even like Togekiss and Heatran, all really love being able to suddenly outspeed all those base 100s and base 110s. And then you've got Thundy there to punish people who do come in and defog. And we've already seen that some of these teams don't have access to spin at all. They only have access to defog. So if they want to get rid of those webs and be able to deal with those like monstrously powerful mid-tier, mid-speed tier offensive threats like Kyurem and Megagara, they're going to have to defog, which really gives you that opportunity for Thundurus to like start going ham on people's teams. So yeah, I think that's really good. I think, as you said, Dougie as a trapper is great. It's going to trap those steals, which helps out Mew, it helps out Kyurem, helps out Togekiss if you are going to run the kind of Scarf, Serene Grace kind of set. But yeah, it is a little bit limited in terms of the kind of support and bulkier options. I think having Mew as the Z user, obviously the Munium Z is great, but if you do get forced into running it as a rock setter or as a defogger, or just generally bulkier most weeks, I think he's going to miss not being able to have Thundurus Eye as a Z user, because obviously Thundy Eye can be a really, really powerful Z user with like Electrium Z or Fightinium Z in a lot of matchups. So yeah, I think it's overall good, but I worry about the reliance on Mew as both an offensive breaker, as a sweeper, and also as a bulky rock setter, bulky defogger. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, like Togekiss and Heatran, pretty good defogger and rocker respectively, so they should be able to support it okay, but there may be some matchups where they aren't as useful, and that might limit the building a little bit. But yeah, I think this is starting to get to the point where, you know, like most of the teams are pretty good. This team is pretty solid and will be like reasonably competitive in most matchups, I would say.
I think the only issue the team has is maybe from a physical side with grass types, because Megagira does have options for like Bounce or Ice Fang, but I believe that Slick will definitely have to rely on his special Pokemon like Heatran and Togekiss and Kyurem to get rid of those bulky grass types that allow the physical sweepers to do their job and sweep.
Yeah, particularly given that the Thundurus isn't Z, so it can't do the like Flyinium Z set, which can potentially let you break past bulky grass types like Tangrowth and well, I guess he's got Shaman on his team, so that's not too bad. But yeah, stuff like Amoonguss and stuff like Tangrowth. Alright, so that's probably enough about that team. So let's move on to the Washington Redskitty, who I ranked at number 8, you ranked at number 10. They're coached by Matt Metagross, and I'll start talking about this one. So I quite like this team. It's a bit weird, in that like you don't normally expect to see stuff like Gengar and Mienshao as your kind of only 110, 105 kind of options, but that said, it's got some really, really powerful breakers. So things like, obviously the Landorus Eye is there, and that's going to break teams in half a lot of the time. But even stuff like Darmanitan, Specs Primarina can be a really powerful breaker. And, you know, stuff like Reckless High Jump Kick from Mienshao can really put the hurt on a lot of teams. So I really like that. And then I think the bulkier options are actually starting to become a lot more solid in a team like this as compared to some of the earlier teams. So stuff like Tangrowth, Reuniclus, you're going to want to bring those most weeks. So that really helps you in terms of prep. Tyranitar can be really good as a bulky rock setter in a lot of matchups, particularly because as opposed to its Mega form, which is probably better at the Dragon Dance set, regular T-Tar can obviously run berries and take on specific threats that might otherwise be able to take it out. So that's good. A couple of more niche support options with Komala and Steelix. I think Steelix is a pretty decent rocker, and it is a really good Tapu Koko response, which is always a great thing to have on a draft, which is really nice. And then Komala, okay spinner. I don't know that I've ever seen anyone use it particularly well, so we'll see if Matt can get something going with that. But yeah, like overall, I quite like this team. I think that the offense and then the momentum with things like Manectric, Mienshao, Landorus, Dom, to really get in those slower breakers like Primarina to potentially punch holes in people's teams is a really nice combo. But we'll see how it goes. It does lack, like, there's no hazards beyond rocks, which is a bit of a problem. But overall, I think this team's going to go pretty well. How about you?
I definitely believe that this team will be a pain in the butt to prep for, and it will definitely break a lot of teams. I feel that between Dharm and Kamala, there's no one there to fill that speed tier, so that could maybe be exploited a little bit, even though Gengar, Mienshao, and Dharm are all great Scarfers. I believe the hazard support is terrible. Komala, as you said, I've never seen it been used well, and having the Landorus run Defog is definitely not an option you want on this team, as the Life Orb set with Sheer Force can just run through teams itself, run like Rock Polish plus 3 moves. I do like the Regenerator Core in Tangrowth and Reuniclus. That helps provide a little extra bulk for the team. Tyranitar, I think, will be an option that comes most weeks over something like Steelix, as I believe Tyranitar is a better rock setter. The team is a little ice weak with Lando and Tangrowth, and I believe Steelix as well is ice weak.
No.
So having
Steelix would be neutral because of the steel typing.
Okay.
But still, I mean, it doesn't
so
take ice beams all that well because of its like lacking special bulk. So, like, I think there's definitely a point there.
So, like, just having something like Primarina and have to switch into ice-type moves every week, or maybe something bulky like Reuniclus, I don't think having the option for that ice-type weakness is there particularly well. And even knockoff, too. Like, I don't really see anything that really wants to take a knockoff on the team. But, yeah, like, I think overall it's a pretty strong draft. Maybe higher than what I ranked it at 10. After taking a second look, but I think just having the lack of hazard support is something to make note of.
Yeah, definitely. Like, Lando as the default route is really bad, but I mean, this is one of those teams where, and I know there's a couple of teams that have already made transactions. I know in the majors there's been like 5 or 6 teams that have already made transactions. I expect it'll probably be pretty similar with the minors, and this is a team where, yeah, if you add one decent hazard remover over, the Kamala, the Steelix, you could possibly ditch something. I don't know. You could maybe ditch Tyranitar or Primarina in exchange for something if there's something good available that can also remove hazards. Could make this team a lot stronger, but as it stands, I know some players can really deal with hazards. They're just like, yep, cool, you're going to set hazards. I'm going to still win the game anyway. Because, and there is the offensive power on this squad to do that, where it doesn't require that many turns to really blow your team to shreds. But we'll see how it goes. I think maybe like Lando plus Dom might have appreciated web support because they're both in that kind of, they're fast, but they're not quite as fast as a lot of people's teams, so they are going to be forced out a little bit. So yeah, maybe web support or a better remover might see this team go up the power rankings a bit, but we'll see how it goes once the battles start. So,
okay, up next is me, Waterloo Weavile, and we are definitely apart on this one. I'm going to start before you tear it to shreds. Looking at it a second time, I am extremely rocks weak. Mega Arrow, Talonflame, Skarm, Incineroar. Like my three defoggers are all really weak to rocks, and my options to remove them aren't great. I'm also quite electric weak, so I definitely see where you're coming from from the 11th standpoint.
Yeah.
But I do like my speed tiers on the team. I definitely have the options to run priority and different scarfers, maybe like Ninetales, which would outspeed most of the meta. But yeah, I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. I actually really like a lot of this team. I think, as you said, the speed tiers are great. Like, I mean, probably bottoming out at 60 with Incineroar obviously is slightly unideal if you do go up against a Trick Room squad. But aside from that, like having 150 and having a bunch of mons over 100 and then a nice spread of 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, so that's really good. And there are some really good hazard setters here. Mega Arrow is great at pressuring, forcing people out and setting rocks. Celebi's good bulky rock setter. Skarm, Swampert, Clefable, like those are all excellent rock setters, and obviously Skarm can do spikes as well. So yeah, the hazards are great. The removal, as you said, is very unideal. Having all three of them be flying types. Obviously, Skarm, because of the steel type, isn't weak to rocks, but will still take that rocks chip and really appreciates not having its sturdy broken when it comes in. Um, so yeah, rocks are going to be a big problem, and but on the other hand, Ninetales or Lola with the Zygarde 50, especially with the Z move on the Zygarde, is really nice. That's gonna get you some wins just automatically because there's not a lot people can do once you set up a Veil and then start Dragon Dancing with Zygarde. So that's really good, and there are some really really nice support mons. So stuff like Incineroar, Clef, Swampert. You don't have to bring all of them every week, but you can feel comfortable bringing them most weeks. So yeah, like I think this team's quite good. I think it's probably like the more niche offensive threats like Mega Arrow, or like, not the Mega Arrow's niche, but like the stuff outside of the main thing, the main attraction of this team, which is definitely the Zygarde, being the Mega Arrow, the Talon, I guess the Toxicroak as well, but the first two of those being Rocks Weak and the lack of defog does mean that this team loses out a bit in terms of whether I think those offensive threats will actually work in a game. But if you can make it work, then like Mega Arrow Talon can both punch through teams. Zygarde is great at either punching through teams or sweeping. And Toxicroak, I definitely don't sleep on Toxicroak because that thing is so powerful. Speed tier is not great, but it does have access to priority on physical and special side, which is something that very few mons can like adequately run. So that's always really really good to see. And yeah, no, overall, I think this team has the potential to do really well. But it'll depend on whether or not you can overcome that kind of hazard weakness and that electric weakness. Although the electric weakness is not too bad because you do have the double grounds, which is a great thing to do with Zygarde, having double grounds that have different 4x weaknesses. So people are going to struggle a little bit unless they've got something that's an electric type that can run like Energy Ball and then Hidden Power Ice as well. Which, is pretty much like Xurkitree and like a handful of other mons, so not too much to worry about there. So yeah, no, I think this team will go quite well. I was maybe being a little harsh on it at 11. I will admit I didn't actually know which team was yours when I was ranking them, so this wasn't me being like, oh yeah, I'm going to rank the co-host down. I literally just didn't know which names were attached to most teams when I was ranking them. I think it was only like Dolphin and then there's maybe one or two others where I knew the names, but yeah, I think overall it should be good. I'm intrigued to see how you go.
Yeah, like I wouldn't even sleep on Clefable. Like you mentioned a couple of different defensive sets, but having the ability to run Life Orb and Magic Guard, it might catch a couple of teams off guard just to have that extra power from Clefable.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you can run the Calm Mind set, but you can also run the Cosmic Power set that can really catch teams off guard. Because, yeah, that can really hurt people. if they don't have a good dark type with the Cosmic Power, Stored Power combo. So yeah, I think it'll be an interesting team to watch. So let's move on to our next team, which is the Des Moines Delibird. So this is another one where we had a really radical difference in our rankings. So I had this team at number 3. I think this team's really good. But you had it at number 12, which is quite low. So I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts first on how you felt, why you felt this team was maybe not quite as good.
Honestly, looking at it again, I think I was maybe way too harsh on the team. I don't really think he has that great of options for removal outside of Zapdos. And having Zapdos being extremely rock weak is something to note. I don't think his team's particularly fast, which could also be another hindrance. He does have the Kartana and the Infernape that could both run Scarf. And I don't think his bulk is particularly great with Hippo, Toxapex, and Snorlax. I feel like there are a couple of Pokemon in the game that have access to Psychic type moves and Water type moves to kind of wear down both Hippo and Pax if they decide to come. And having the residual damage from Sand could hinder Toxapex and Snorlax's longevity in a game. He does have the ability to set hazards well with Hippo and Infernape and Lycanroc, and even having the option with Toxapex to run Poison with Baneful Bunker or Toxic or T-Spikes is definitely a good option to have. I didn't really see any Pokemon that would really want to take a knockoff. Like you could maybe argue Hippo or Azu, but Azu wants to run the berry for Belly Drum. The lack of Dragon type is kind of interesting. I can see why it's not super useful in Draft League anymore with the rise of Fairy type Pokemon. And then I also didn't notice a Mega, which is also interesting because that can add extra power to a team. But outside of like Kartana, Lele, and Azu, there aren't really a lot of big threats. Like I guess Kartana, Infernape, Lele, and Azu can come all 4 weeks and do work. But outside of those 4, I don't think the team has the ability to kind of break as well as it can.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. And I had a bit of trouble ranking this team because I really liked theoretically all these mons. Like pretty much, every mon on this list aside from Aeron, I'd be pretty comfortable bringing most weeks. Probably the only one that's maybe a little bit less good is Braviary, but even then, Braviary, like, with Sheer Force can be quite powerful. It can run Defiant, so if you can get your opponent to defog by setting up T-Spikes with Toxapex, then you can take advantage of that with Braviary. So, like, I really like this team overall. But, yeah, I do think some of the weaknesses you pointed out, like the speed tier's not going above 112 is a problem. It's mitigated by Lycanroc and Infernape both having very powerful priority options, as well as Azumarill obviously having one of the most powerful priority options, so that's good. But yeah, I do think that like when you have the Tapu Lele that can stop opposing priority, you really want to have something that is like in that 130 kind of speed tier, because then your opponent can sometimes have no counterplay for it because they can't unless they've got a Scarfer, they can't outspeed it with their team because they may not have something that's over 130, and they can't use priority on it because of terrain. So yeah, I think there could have been a bit more synergy with the Lele there, but as it stands, like Lele, Kartana, Infernape, Azumarill, with Lycanroc having access to Z moves, and then like potentially like Braviary as another offensive option is, I feel, enough offense. I think, yeah, you're right in saying that it might be a little bit, it might be a bit linear. Like you're gonna bring those handful like Kartana, Infernape, Lele, probably gonna come every week. So that's not as good, but yeah, I don't know. I really like this team. I think the fact that Hippo is setting Sand is a little bit annoying, but Toxapex obviously with the regen can like ameliorate that to a large extent, and Snorlax is probably the one where it doesn't like it as much. But on the other hand, Snorlax is just so naturally bulky, and with the recycled berry set, is gonna be able to wall some teams. So yeah, I don't know. I really liked the priority options. I really liked the ability to just kind of set terrain and then blast through teams with something like a Scarf Kartana, or even like a Banded Infernape. But we'll see how it goes. It may struggle a bit with those like teams that have those things in that 125 to 130 speed tier, particularly if Lele is setting the terrain and then you can't revenge those mons because you can't use your priority options from Lycanroc or Infernape. Might be a little bit of reverse synergy, which might hurt the team a little. But we'll see how it goes. I don't know. I really like the mons on this team overall, but we'll see how they synergize.
On the topic, just before we switch here to the next team, the topic of reverse synergy, Psychic Terrain and Toxapex, I think that's definitely something like to boost your opponent's Psychic type moves to wear down Toxapex. I think that might bite Spoink in the season.
Yeah, that's a good point. Particularly if it's a mon that doesn't normally run psychic moves, but maybe has like a Zen Headbutt in its moveset, or even just it's a powerful special attacker that normally can't break Toxapex, but it can just run Hidden Power Psychic, and with the terrain, that suddenly becomes the equivalent of having Psychic. So, yeah, that is something he's going to have to watch out for. Particularly since, aside from Lele itself, there's no Dark type on this team, so opposing Psychics are going to be a really big threat. There's no Dark type. The Steel type is Kartana. Actually, if I'd noticed that, I probably would have rated this team a little lower because, yeah, opposing powerful Psychic types are going to be a huge problem for this team. Like a Mega Alakazam would just like destroy this entire team.
Good thing no one drafted it.
No one drafted Mega Zam. That's very sad. I don't actually know if anyone drafted it. Just to be able to have to go back and check the drafts. But yeah. So we'll see. Maybe someone will pick that up in transactions just for Spoink. But we'll see how it goes. So let's move on to our next team. So this is now we're starting to get into teams. I think every team from now on are teams that we both ranked in the top 10. And I think probably both ranked in the top half, really. So this is the Kentucky Toracats, coached by Mid Pokemaster. And this is the Coco Lucha team, as you might expect on most drafts. Although in Majors, we actually ended up with Bulu Lucha, I believe, instead. But obviously, Coco Lucha, very well-renowned offensive sweeping core. Really, really tough to deal with in a lot of matchups, and will just win some games, and they'll win them 5 or 6-0 sometimes, which is obviously going to help in terms of differential for playoffs. So that's a really good start. The rest of the team I don't like quite as much. There's some decent breaking power with Bandit Entei can break teams, and then Lati, if you run Specs Lati, can do some work. But aside from that, it's kind of just a lot of pivoting with things like Golbat and Meloetta, support with things like, the Hitmontop, the Vape, the Mega Aggron. I really didn't like the fact that both Rockers, Mega Aggron and Donphan, they both hate Scald, for example. They're both at 50 speed tier, so you really don't need much to be able to taunt them and stop them from setting rocks. And yeah, I think that this team has a really solid core of offensive mons, like those top 4, Coco, Lucha, Lati, Entei. But I think maybe outside of that, the utility is a little bit lacking. I don't know. What do you think?
Looking at his team, I think the Cofagrigus is definitely a glue to the entire team. Having Trick Room can definitely help Pokemon like Mega Aggron, Donphan, and Lurantis potentially counter sweep teams. Definitely having Hitmontop and Donphan to spin is excellent to remove hazards. He's slightly psychic weak. He has Meloetta and the Latios to take those. But if the Meloetta is in its pirouette form, the team becomes definitely a lot less bulky for psychic types. I think the Fairy Dragon Steel core is probably some of the best I've seen. Having Coco, Latios, and Mega Aggron, just to have that bulk and the special power is excellent. I do like the momentum across the speed tiers, so Coco and Hawlucha, and then having Meloetta at 90 with Golbat. is definitely cool to have. It can give him access to kind of a slow turn into his offensive threats or a fast turn into his defensive Pokemon. I think, again, not having the Pokemon in the 80 speed tier might warrant opponents to run something Scarfed there, so that can outspeed the Entei or the Latios. But definitely, it has the ability to adapt quite well, and then good synergy between resistances.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think Vaporeon actually, if anything, even more so than the Kofag, is going to be really important for this team because stuff like Mega Aggron, and Meloetta and Kofag all love having a bulky Wish Passer, which is going to be really handy to try and keep this team alive for long enough that you can set the stage for the Coco Lucha core to get that sweep, or for you to clean up with Entei with like Bandit E-Speed, or maybe a DD Latiosaurus, Carmine Latios to break through. So I think, yeah, like if Vaporeon is good in the matchup, then this team's going to be really, really hard to beat. If Vaporeon's not as good in the matchup, if your opponent has a really good electric type or like very powerful offensive grass type, for example, then I think this team might struggle a little bit more, particularly because, particularly against a grass type where, like, I guess, yeah, like your grass switch-ins tend to be the more offensive side of the team, like things like Entei and Lati and Holucha. Are not necessarily things you want to switch in to take hits. And then like Golbat, I guess, but Golbat's not something, again, that you're going to want to bring in a lot of weeks. And then Lurantis, which is kind of, yeah, as you said, one of the like kind of trickery reverse sweepers. So yeah, I think this team can go well. I mean, I've ranked it at number 7. I've ranked it at the top half, so I did think it was overall a pretty good team. But maybe a couple of flaws in terms of being overly reliant on a couple of mons at the bottom that have very similar speed tiers and potentially some shared weaknesses, with things like Vaporeon and Donphan both being grass weak. Obviously, Mega Aggron's not water weak, but doesn't like taking water type moves. The grass type being Lurantis is not great as a ground switch in, which is obviously not great when you're drafted Tapu Koko. So yeah, we'll see how this team goes, but overall does have some good options. I think maybe could use a faster Stealth Rocker or a faster Spiker or something like that just to support the team a bit more. But aside from that, pretty solid overall.
Just one last note.
Yeah.
Like we said with Spoink's team with Lele, I think having Coco and Vaporeon could definitely hinder the team quite a bit. Having to rely on maybe something like Donphan to take those electric type moves with the terrain that Coco sets.
That's true, yeah. And I mean, yeah, because aside from that, I guess like something like an Assault Vest Meloetta can take special electric hits pretty well, so that's not too bad. But yeah, there may be matchups where if your opponent has a good grounded electric type, that you may have to bring the Lurantis, even if you don't want to, just because you need that extra support to stop yourself from being from opposing electric types really hurting you. So yeah, good point there. Let's move on to our next team, which is the Carolina Pancham, coached by Panda. We both had this team at number 4, so we both thought this team was really good. I think there's like this team and one other team coming up where we both thought they were really solid, and then the other two teams in this kind of top bracket are teams where we had a bit of difference in our opinion. So on this team, I thought this team, yeah, is pretty solid. It has really, really good support. Like both Florgs and Alomomola with the clerical options, Florgs, Delmise, and Hydreigon all having removal options, which is nice. Good hazard options with Scolipede. Archeops is not a great stealth rocker, but it's there. Mega Camel, not a great stealth rocker. That's probably actually the weakness I think on this team, is that like Stack Attacker, Mega Camerupt, and Archeops is such a weird set of stealth rockers that there are going to be weeks when none of those are ideal for what you want out of your team. So I think that's going to be a problem. But triple cleric, I forgot to mention Mushana earlier, can also be a clerical option with Heal Bell. and good removal is nice and will help out things like the Scolipede and the Archeops to actually be those kind of big offensive threats. Both of them are the Z users as well, so they'll do well. And then, the big thing I haven't mentioned so far is obviously there's an Aegislash there, and that's probably realistically what's bumping this team up for me a lot, is just the fact that there's like an okay looking team, and then there's an Aegislash on top of that. So like really good Trick Room core with Stack Attack and Mega Camerupt, and then Aegislash can also be a great Trick Room sweeper. So yeah, there's some really solid slower threats here that are going to be really hard to deal with, and then also some really solid faster threats like Speed Boost Scolipede, Scarf Hydreigon, that'll be able to put in work. So yeah, like very, very fast mons, very, very slow mons, and some good glue, but may struggle a little bit setting up hazards to actually set up for that sweep in the first place. What do you think?
Yeah, looking at it, definitely harder. Not having the ability to set rocks from something like Archeops, because it's really frail, is definitely something that might be of concern. But I think having the breaking power of Scolipede in the early game and then setting up something with Stack Attacker like Trick Room could definitely change the tide, where Stack Attacker and Mega Camerupt and Aegislash could definitely put in good work in the later game. But yeah, like having Jolteon, Scolipede, Hydreigon to break is just something that teams will definitely fear. Probably one of the better defoggers in Draft League, and Florges is nice. Kind of a weaker electric type, but Jolteon does fit the role quite well of momentum to get into the bigger threats or the Trick Room setters. I believe like it's kind of two different drafts that Panda made here, but I think overall I think it works quite well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Two different drafts that have been just mushed together, with kind of the Heracross as the like bridging, Heracross and the Florges as the bridging between the two. Yeah, we'll see how this goes. It's a really interesting team. I could see it just like smashing through teams with Mega Camel and Stack Attacker being at the top of the kill lists all season, but I could also see it really struggling if Panda can't deal with the things that just kind of stop those mons from sweeping. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Overall, very strong team. So let's move on to the next up, which is the Amarillo Azumarill. I couldn't find a logo for this team in the doc, so apologies to Arctic Something, the coach. I ranked this team number 5. You ranked it number 2. So you really like this team. So take us away on this one.
I think the team definitely has great hazards. Lando T is a great rocker. Nihilego can definitely put in work either as a sweeper or as a setter. I don't think, like, I guess he has Serena for spin, which is excellent to keep up the webs and the spikes and T-spikes for his team. He can definitely break with Scizor and Lando T and Nihilego. I feel like he can definitely clean with Conkeldurr or Scizor with their priority. I think Greninja is a cool Pokemon as well, with really fast priority and Water Shuriken and having access to U-turn. I think just overall this team synergizes really, really well together. And even having access to defog with 4 different Pokemon that are excellent defoggers is something to take note of, that this team won't have to deal with hazards at all.
Yeah.
They have so much support and so much bulk that I think this team will be something to fear in the draft.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I have one big criticism for this team, which is that the Z user is Greninja and not Landorus T. I don't like that at all. I think Greninja, yeah, it's a decent Z user. Like Hydro Vortex can be really powerful, but Landorus T is one of the best Z users in the format. Z-Fly is incredible. Continental Crush is incredible. It makes it something that can sweep through teams, and this team does not have a lot that can sweep through teams. Swords Dance Mega Scizor, something like a Bulk Up Conkeldurr, I guess to some extent like Carmine Latias, or the Nihilego. None of them are like sweepers that are going to reliably be able to break through teams every week. I think Lando T is something with Z moves that can reliably break almost any team. because it can break grass types with Z-Fly, it can break water types with like Z Ground, Z Fly, or Z Stone Edge, depending on what their weaknesses are. Like, it's such a good Z user. I just don't understand why Arctic decided to go with Z Greninja instead. But that said, all the rest of the points you made are really good. And I agree that the hazard support is great. The hazard removal is incredible. The momentum is really good with like Grand Lando, Mega Scizor, Sarina, Electros all being able to U-turn to bring in frailer offensive threats like Hiligo, to bring in the Mega Scizor, even to bring in the Conkeldurr, which is something that maybe wants to take one hit, but it doesn't want to take two usually. It usually wants to take one and then Drain Punch to get its health back. And I think it's overall a really good team, but I think he made one poor decision, and I probably was being a bit harsh to take it down to number 5 on the basis of one poor decision, but I do think it genuinely impacted on the ability of the team to like have flexible sweeping options against most squads. But yeah, Arctic overall, really like it.
Maybe Arctic thought that Greninja's vast move pool could be benefited from the Z move, like maybe having a Z Ice Beam or a Z Grass Knot or even a Z Hydro Pump could definitely put in the work every week. Yeah,
definitely.
I do agree that Z Fly is something that could definitely be warranted over Greninja. I do see your point there.
Yeah, I mean, I've used Z Greninja recently, and it was really fun. But I just think overall, Z Lando T is just, when you've got a Lando T, you put the Z move on there straight away. Like, I think I had it in my notes like before people started nominating their Z users. I was like, oh yeah, this team's really good. It's got a Z Lando, and then he didn't have a Z Lando, and I was very sad. But anyway, let's move on to the next team, which is the San Antonio Spikes. So this is one of two teams where, so spoilers, it's not really spoilers because you don't know who the next team is yet, but I ranked this team at number 1 and you ranked it at number 6. The next team, you ranked it number 1 and I ranked it number 6. So the order of these was pretty arbitrary, but this is the San Antonio Spikes, coached by Simeon, and I really, really like this team. I think it has an excellent regenerator core with the Tornadus T plus the Slowbro. I think that something like Chansey is a mon that doesn't often do that well in draft format, but if any team can make Chansey work, I think it's a team like this, where you've got Cobalion, which takes advantage of knockoff through having Justified as its ability. You have the Mega Altaria that does not care about knockoffs at all because it's a fairy type and it's a Mega. You've got even something like the Zorora tends not to mind knockoffs too much, and potentially stuff like Effects Pour on Vileplume could be a way to punish knockoff as well. So you have some decent ways to punish people trying to spam knockoff against Chansey, which lets it do its job a lot better. And then overall, the utility options here are quite good. So Spikes and T-Spikes on the Roserade is a really, really solid setter because it's reasonably bulky, but also quite fast, so it'll outspeed most opposing setters or opposing removal. So that's good. And then, great sweeping option with Mega Altaria. Z Tornadus T is one of my favorite Z users in the format, and I guess the difference here between this and the last team is that Simeon decided to actually give the Z to the mon that I thought was clearly the better Z user, as opposed to something like Zorora, which is a decent Z user, but I actually got exposed to this a bit recently in a couple of DPL tryout games where Z Zorora still can't break stuff like Tangrowth. Z Bounce and Z Fire Punch, it's still not breaking that mon, so I don't really see the point of putting a Z on something like Zorora when it can't, you have Volt Switch on it. If you're up against something that walls you just Volt Switch out. But yeah, I really like the utility of this team. It has excellent rockers, and good defog options, and a good spinner option in Blastoise. So yeah, I don't know. I really like this team overall. What did you think of this team?
I liked it, but I didn't like it at the same time. I don't think Silvally or Blastoise are the best options for hazard removal.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Mega Altaria and Torn T as options to defog, but it definitely doesn't allow these Pokemon to break as well as they could be, because Tornadus wants to run C moves, and Mega Altaria probably wants to run either the D Dance set or the double dance set with Cotton Guard. I think Chansey's definitely something that isn't great in draft format. Definitely relies on Eviolite way too often. I think the Regenerator Core having flying and water as the two types, it definitely opens it up for an electric weakness. Zeraora does cover that, but I wouldn't want to switch that in all the time, just in case your opponent has hazards up, or if they have a dual typing that can take advantage of the electric type. I do think Vileplume is a sleeper pick for sure. Strength Sap is a set that can be run a lot and can definitely change the momentum of a game. I also didn't like that the momentum is mostly from her faster Pokemon. There's nothing in the lower tier that can use a slow U-turn into an offensive threat. So I think picking up something slower that has access to Volt Switch or U-turn or even Parting Shot would definitely be an upgrade to get into the threats that can sweep in later games.
Yeah, it may even be the case that she wants to run negative speed nature on Silvally sometimes, just for that slower parting shot, which is a weird thing to be being forced into running, but like may actually be genuinely the best option in some occasions. Because yeah, that is a really good point. You really want to have that kind of slow momentum to bring in the Mamo or the Mega Altaria to really pile on offensive pressure. But if it's Zeraora or Taunty or Cobalion, they're probably going to outspeed most things they're matched up against. So yeah, that's a really good point. But yeah, I think overall, I think I'm probably a little higher on Silvally and Blastoise as like solid removal options than you are. So I guess that probably explains a little bit of the difference. And then I don't know. I really like regen cores, and I especially really like Taunty. I think it's like it's not slept on anymore, but I think there was a stage there in the format where people didn't think of it as a round one pick, and now I'm like, no, this is top 10. This is top 10 mons in the format in my opinion. So I always love to see it on a team, and particularly with a mon that is a lot faster. I feel like I've definitely drafted it before and had it be the fastest mon on the team, and I think it's a little bit underwhelming in that role, but having Zeraora there as a support is really, really good for the Taunty, I think. So yeah, we'll see how this team goes. Let's move on to the next team, which is the Seattle Soulblaze, who I had at number 6 and you had at number 1. So why don't you take us away with Bash's team to talk about how much you love it.
So I think Bash just did an out of the park home run job with this team. Rabombi with webs is just so good for a team that wants to rely on something like Salamence to break. Alolan Persian definitely with that momentum. With Parting Shot can allow things like Necrozma to set up or the Porygon 2 to come in safely. It just limits the amount of damage those Pokemon can take. Mega Mawile is probably one of the best Pokemon in Draft League format just because it can break really, really well. So having Pokemon weakened so that can come in is definitely a great option to have. The bulk on the team is just ridiculous. Necrozma, Mesprit, P2, Rotom-Fan, Scrafty, like all those Pokemon, even with their abilities, can allow them to survive longer than what they should be able to. Like having Scrafty come in with Intimidate, or P2 has the Eviolite, and then just to back that up with threats, like Mawile's a threat, Volcanion's a threat, Necrozma can be a threat either on on the special side or physical side because of Photon Geyser, and then Nidoking and Salamence are just two great breakers in the format, I believe.
Yeah, that's all really good points. I think probably my main issue with this team was probably just that a lot of the offense is Rocks weak, and Decidueye as the only defogger that's not itself Rocks weak is not great in my opinion. In that obviously like Volcanion, not a real defogger. Salamence, not really a real defogger. Rotom Fan, okay, but Rock's weak and a very lower tier picks are not something you want to bring every week. So I wasn't a huge fan of that, given that Salamence hates having rocks on the field. Volcanion, if it's going to try and break through a team, hates having rocks on the field. Rabombi, if it's going to try and do Quiver Dancing, hates having rocks on the field. On the other hand, the web side of the team is incredible. Like, yeah, you're totally right. Webs plus Nidoking, Mega Mawile, Volcanion, like, that's disgusting. That's going to punch so many holes, and people are going to be forced to defog so much against this team. That said, and there's a spin blocker there as well with Decidueye, so that's also really, really handy. Always something I love. If you're going to do Web's offense, love having a Ghost type to spin block. I think this team's overall very strong. I wasn't a huge fan of the removal options, just because I don't rate Decidueye all that highly. But, I have seen some people make Decidueye work, and if Bash is one of them, then I think this team's going to go incredibly well. Mega Mawile plus Salamence is quite scary. And I think, you're right in terms of the bulk. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of it when I was looking at it, but you're right to say that the abilities of a lot of these mons do help out. So, like Rotom Fan being off the ground, obviously, because of its flying type, and then like Necrozma having the Prism Armor, Volcanion having the Water Absorb, Scrafty, Mega Mawile, Salamence all have access to Intimidate, and then Persian Alola with the Fur Coat. That does actually make the bulk a lot better than it seems at first, especially if you just like looked at the stats for a lot of these mons. So, I think this team's, like, certainly it's in the top half, and I think it will go very well. We'll see how he can play around removal in order to get the best out of things like Salamence and Rabombi. I expect this team to be right in the conversation with regards to playoffs. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, like, just one last note here. Like, having momentum with Rabombi, Persian, Mesprit, Decidueye, like, just having the speed tier across, like, the momentum fast and slow is, I think, something that can definitely benefit Bash quite a bit.
Definitely. All right. So, now, I think this is our number one, which is the Victoria Victinis, coached by Zombie. So, I had this at number 2, and you had it at number 3, but given that the previous two teams we both sort of had a bit of disagreement on, this is actually the team that I believe got the highest overall ranking. And honestly, it's pretty easy to see why, in my opinion. There are so many good sweeping options on this team. Like, holy crap. Superior, easy sweeping option with Contrary Leaf Storm. Manaphy, it's a Z Manaphy, so it can do the Z Rain Dance, or it can just do Tail Glow plus a Z move. Mega Charizard X, probably one of the best, if not the best, Dragon Dance sweeper in the format. Maybe, I guess, aside from like Zygarde, is maybe a little bit better just in terms of being overall having more utility as a mon. But Zardex is incredible. Mimikyu, plug and play. You can just fit it onto any team, and it's something that forces so much prep. And I think that's my main thing that I love so much about this team. It forces so much prep with all of those offensive threats, and then also with the defensive threats. Like, you have to bring something with a powerful fighting type move or a powerful bug type move to break Umbreon. You have to bring something with... I guess that is actually probably my main flaw with this team, is that Umbreon, Blissey, Registeel, powerful fighting types destroy that defensive core. There is... obviously the Gliscor, which is a really good Gloomon, and I think is going to be very important for this team to resist those fighting type moves. But then Azelf, not a very bulky Psychic. On the other hand, Rocks, really good options with Azelf, Lycanroc, Gliscor, Blissey, so you've got spread out speed tier, and Registeel as well, shouldn't forget the Registeel. And then great clerical options with things like Blissey. I believe Ampharos gets Heal Bell as well. And then some decent defog and spin options. That's probably a little bit of a weakness. Superior often does have room for defog, just because usually you only need Leaf Storm plus Hidden Power as offensive moves. But Gliscor maybe wants to run Rocks more than it wants to run defog, and then Hitmonchan is, an unideal rapid spinner. But yeah, I really like this team. I think the offensive presence is really strong. I think it sets up so easily and is going to be able to turn games around very quickly. And I think that the bulk, whilst it does have a pretty glaring fighting weakness, is going to be hard to break for teams that don't have a fighting type, because some teams just don't draft it because it's not seen as important of a offensive typing to have. So yeah, that's probably my thoughts so far. What about you?
So I definitely do see the fighting weakness as well. But I think having Gliscor and Mimikyu as two Pokemon that don't really care about fighting type moves is great. Again, like the abilities on this team, Mimikyu with Disguise, it's gonna have to take 2 hits before you can actually damage it. And then that gives Mimikyu the option to set up and do some breaking potential. Gliscor with the ability of Poison Heal, it doesn't care about Toxic, which maybe Umbreon and Blissey would care about. And then even Contrary with Superior, like just to get that +2 special attack boost is definitely breaking for a lot of teams. And then Azolf definitely punishes those fighting types that want to come for for Umbreon, Blissey, and Registeel. So I believe like this team synergizes so well that I don't think many teams will be able to beat Zombie in all honesty, because like, this team just works so well together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's going to be a case of, like, I don't think you can prep for this team effectively. I think you're just going to have to be confident in your game plan and be able to be like, okay, I have this game plan, I'm going to try and do this. I can't really try and predict what 6 Mons he's going to bring, because there's just like, that entire top 6 Mons is incredible offense, and that entire bottom 6, maybe with the exception of Ampharos, and to some extent Hitmonchan, are all pretty solid defensive options. So yeah, I think it is going to be hard to figure out exactly which offensive threats are going to come each week and exactly what kind of offensive threats they're going to be. So I really like having the Z on Manaphy with the Zardex, because obviously one of those can be, you can do the Swords Dance Zardex with the Z Rain Dance Manaphy, so you've got the Zardex to break and the Manaphy to sweep, or you can do the reverse and do Tail Glow Manaphy, D-Dance Zard, and suddenly the way that you have prepped for that completely changes depending on which set those two are running. So that's going to be so tough to prep for each week. Yeah, I think this team's going to be really solid, and I'm excited to see how its games go. We have had a couple of games already. I haven't actually watched either of them yet. But yeah, we'll see how we go. So I believe that's it for our power rankings. Yep, cool. That was our number 1. So congratulations to Zombie. You win the meaningless title of Week 0 number 1 in power rankings from the D-League. So I think that's about all we have. We'll be back next week with Week 1 power rankings for the majors, and hopefully also Week 1 power rankings for the minors. Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to say before we finish up?
I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to take part in this. I really do appreciate being able to help you out with this and take time to really understand some of these drafts.
Yeah, awesome. No, it's been really good, and I think, yeah, we should be able to hopefully keep this going throughout the season. So to all our viewers, hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you guys next time.